Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Muslims in the USA, London, Delhi, or Johannesburg often wake up on election day facing a thorny question. Is ticking that little box even allowed? Let me first answer this question as succinctly and forthright as possible. In principle, in Islam, voting in disbeliever political systems is impermissible, not allowed for the believing Muslim. I will repeat, in principle, in our in our deen, voting in disbeliever political systems is not allowed for the believing Muslim. Now, there remains a narrow, carefully regulated exception when silence would directly harm the ummah. What do we mean by that? Well, let us build that argument step by step with the Quran and the Sunnah and the tafsir from scholars who hold the strict line. So, for starters, why is the default ruling don't vote for disbelievers in lawmaking and changing political positions? Why is that the default? Well, we as Muslims understand that legislation belongs to Allah alone. Allah says in Surah Yusuf, interpretation of its meaning, judgment belongs to none but Allah. We also find in Surah Ashura where Allah states, have they partners who have legislated for them a religion Allah never gave permission for? So, casting a ballot for people who promise to create or maintain laws that are contrary to the divine revelation is a tacit endorsement of ruling by other than what Allah revealed. You see, Allah gives us severe warnings against supporting injustice when He states in Surah An-Nisa, whoever among you deliberately supports the killing of a believer, his reward is Jahannam, and Allah is angry with him. Ibn Qayyim, he cites this ayah while stating that any action leading to bloodshed, even indirect, is haram. If the candidates openly wage war on Muslim lands, enabling them is viewed as sinful complicitly. We also have statements from some of our scholars, one in particular, Sheikh Al Albani. He stated democracy is a system of kufr. This belief, participating in it, is helping kufr over Islam. And then Sheikh Salih Al Fawzan, he stated, choosing the lesser of two evils does not apply when both choices insist on man made law. So, according to this, their understanding of Quran and the Sunnah, the Muslim's role is bara. That means disassociation from any machinery that enshrines man made sovereignty. Wow. So what do we do? Okay? Do we simply live in a Western society with no say? I mean, as to how we are treated or our rights in that order? Is that how we live in? Well, I presented the default answer. Okay? But we do have in Islam the door of necessity, darura, when silence becomes a sin. Even the strict jurists recognize that darura, which is basically necessity of need, can come into play for specific cases. We have two primary evidences. When you have the obligation to push back harm, okay? Allah says in Surah An-Nisa, interpretation of its meaning, and why should you not fight in the cause of Allah for the weak and oppressed men, women, and children? That was the question he rose. Allah is commanding us to always stand with the oppressed and to remove the harm from them, to take it away. We also must consider the choosing of the lesser evil. Ibn Taymiyyah stated, if leadership is sought, not for itself, but to bring about justice and repel oppression, then seeking it becomes permissible. Ibn al-Qayyim even stated, when two evils clash, the lesser is taken to repel the greater. So, if, and only if, a ballot clearly prevents a specific verifiable harm to Muslims or secures a concrete right, then an individual Muslim may vote, according to many of the jurists, as an act of warding off a greater evil. But how do we know when? How do we know when? We need this direction. There are what we call conditions for a permissible exception based vote. Okay? Scholars who allow this narrow door lay down five stringent conditions, and this is based on the Quran and the Sunnah. One, certainty of benefit or harm prevention. So the policy must be direct. It got to be direct. You got to know what the individuals are talking about. Okay? Let me give you an example. Halal meals in school, okay, legal hijab protections, stopping a discriminatory bylaw, but those are precise things. And there could be many more. But speculative would be maybe they'll like us more. That's not enough, okay? That would not be enough. Two, no viable Islamic alternative. So if a parallel Sharia compliant governance structure exists, or hijra, where you can immigrate, it's possible with reasonable costs, the duty shifts away from voting. And we've talked about that in my video in concerns of if you should move to the West or those that are living in the West. Check out that video. It gets more in detail about that. And number three, diligent research. In Surah Al-Isra, Allah states, do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. Okay? So Allah is basically telling us Muslims must examine things. Read, Iqra, read. So we examine manifestos, voting records, and foreign policy statements to avoid carrying the blood of oppressed Muslims on their ballot. And let's look at 4. Intent of maslaha, not partisanship. The niyyah is lillah, okay, meaning for Allah, to protect the ummah, never tribalism or nationalism. And number 5, no participation in accessory haram. So no backbiting rallies, no interest-based donations, no cheerleading for suspect wars, etc., etc., etc. Now, failing any one of these 5 conditions returns the act to its default. Don't vote impermissible. But you do have some Muslims assume complete and total non-participation is always safe. Many Muslims say just don't do it. And I agree. I agree. However, the Quran warns us otherwise in some cases. In Surah Al-Anfal, Allah states, interpretation of its meaning, beware of a trial that will not afflict only the wrongdoers among you. It will engulf all of you. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated in Sahih in Abu Dawud, if the people see an oppressor and do not restrain him, Allah may punish them all. So, when zoning laws shut down a mosque or a hijab ban sweeps schools, the righteous and heedless suffer together. So, if a measured vote can realistically block such oppression, remaining mute or quiet about it can turn into shared blame. Now, sometimes people are asked to vote for a person who might become a leader, like a president, right? Or, a person in that high of a position. Some people say you should pick the lesser evil. meaning the candidate who is not as bad as the others. But what if that person, once elected, decides to send bombs or start wars in other countries, especially where many Muslims live? This is a very serious problem. Allah states in Surah An-Nisa, interpretation of its meaning, whoever kills a believer intentionally, we have prepared for him a great punishment. So, if a candidate openly supports or plans illegal wars against Muslim countries, voting for them is not just choosing the lesser evil. It could mean helping someone do something dastardly evil. Very wrong. Because of this, Muslims have to be careful. If voting for that person means helping them hurt innocent people, then Muslims, we, the Muslims, those that believe in Allah on the last day, should not vote for them. Full stop. We have already seen the evidence for this. So in Islam, it is not allowed to help with oppression or injustice, no matter what. So the lesser evil argument does not work if, if, if innocent lives are at risk. So here's your take home equation. Default, don't vote. Exception, vote only when 5 conditions are met and the benefit is explicit, immediate, and greater than the harm, which we've discussed. And negligence, fail to act by voice, letter, or ballot when harm is imminent makes the silent share in collective punishment. So, look, this is a tightrope, okay? On one side is the sin of legitimizing man-made rule. On the other, the sin of abandoning the weak. Walk it with taqwa, research, and consultation with trustworthy people of knowledge. May Allah guide your hearts to do that. And we ask that Allah protect the Ummah and absolve us from carrying the blood of the oppressed or the guilt of cowardly silence. On that note, see you back here again. Thanks for coming, and don't forget to support. Your support means a lot to this channel, okay? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.